Hey everybody, how's it going? Here I am back with a new video. This is going to be a little bit different than what we normally do. Instead of reviewing a guitar or rebuilding one or modding something, we're going to talk about something a little bit more practical. So this past weekend I had my first set of gigs with my new band that I'm in. And I hadn't played in a band for a very long time, since I was in high school, in fact. And there were some things that I learned, some things that I noticed that I thought would probably make for a good video. So today, we're going to talk about the 5 things that I learned from my first gig. Alright, so the number one thing, the first thing that I learned in my first gig, your practice / studio / recording tone pretty much means nothing. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have your sound. It doesn't mean that you can't have things that you've built, settings you've put on your pedals that you prefer for when you're practicing or recording at home or playing along with your favorite song. But what that means is, when you get on the stage and you've got the other guitarist or you've got your bassist, you've got your drummer at the very least, and you're up there on the stage doing a sound check, you will notice that your sound may not work very well in a group setting, especially for a live application. Now, a couple things to keep in mind, whether you're miking up your amp or whether it's going directly into a PA system or whether it's just playing out into the air, not being mic'd up at all. You might like a lot of bass in your amp and in your guitar sound. That's fine. But unfortunately, that can cause your guitar to kind of disappear in the live mix because you've got a bass player and you've got a drummer that are filling in those frequencies. As an electric guitar player, it's okay to have some low end, but you really want some mids and some high end to really make it come out and really make it so you can hear it, so the audience can hear it, and so you can hear yourself. So you'll find yourself in the middle of a song or in your sound check tweaking your EQ, maybe to something that you don't like the sound of, but in the scope of being in a mix, it might sound pretty good. For example, if you listen to Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses, there's no denying that's one of the best rock albums ever made and some of the best guitar work that's ever been laid down on a track. Any of those tracks, really, by Slash. But if you isolate his tone, it would probably sound terrible by itself. Very trebly, very piercing, but that's why it works, because it's on top of all of the other things. I noticed while I was performing that my guitar didn't sound right to me, the sound didn't sound right to me, but after the show I listened to a few videos that some people took, and I thought that it actually sounded okay. It sounded a lot different out there in the crowd than it did to me up on the stage. So that's the first thing. Don't get married to your tone. Use it as a base and tweak it as necessary. The second thing that I learned from my first gig, and it's going to sound really stupid, but don't think. Sounds stupid, but don't think. What I mean by that is when you're in the middle of a song, if it's something that you know really well or if it's something that you've just learned, it doesn't matter. I would say the same rules apply. If you sit there and think about it, okay, it's going to go G and then D and then A, and then I'm going to hammer this on. If you start thinking like that in the middle of your performance, you're probably going to screw it up. That's just the way that it is for me anyway. And there were a few times where I'd be in the middle of a song and I'd start thinking that way, and it would cause me to overthink it. Instead of making music and performing, it became more like a recitation of something that I knew as opposed to an art that I was presenting to people. I found that the best parts of my performance from that gig came when I wasn't thinking. For example, I played the introduction, the first two solos, and the rhythm for "Sweet Child of Mine" for my band, and I felt like that was a stellar performance by myself. Not patting myself on the back. What I mean by that is there weren't really any mistakes, and the reason was because instead of thinking about what chords I was going to play, I was just feeling it. I was feeling the drummer. I was feeling the bass player. I was listening to the vocalist. I could hear the lead guitarist on the other side during that huge solo moment with me playing that driving rhythm behind it. And in that moment, I felt myself kind of being taken away by the music and by projecting the music instead of projecting the chords. I found that that was some of the best part of my performance, and it kind of went that way with all the other songs I felt I did well. Commonality between the songs I did well, I didn't really think about it. I just went out there, I did it. The songs I don't think I did so well, I overthought. I thought too much about where I was going to go. I thought too much about what chords I was going to play. I thought too much about the tempo. I thought too much about where the words were going to go when I was singing. And those were the times when I would overthink it and it may not come out as crisp or as good as it could have. So that's the second thing that I learned is don't think. The third thing that I learned in my first gig, mistakes will happen. Now, if you are a professional, perfect musician, perfect guitarist, you practice for 90 hours a week, you might not have this problem. And those people do exist, and I'm not making fun of you if you do or doubting that you do, because those people that are perfect do exist. Most of us aren't. And there were a few times while I was playing that there were some mistakes that happened. Whether it was a line where I sang the words wrong, or whether it was a note didn't sustain the way it was supposed to, or simply the chord was missed or it was the wrong one. I mean, these are 4-hour sets, so at least one mistake is probably going to happen. What I learned is that the mistakes, it's not trying to avoid them all, because you should try to avoid them all. But instead, the focus should be on what do you do when that happens. So I've seen examples of mistakes that happen, and whoever made the mistake will make a face, or they'll look at the rest of the band like, uh-oh, or they'll look out at the crowd like, you didn't hear that, did you? Or I'll see other band members will look at the guy who messed up, whether the drummer played the wrong thing, or the bassist flubbed the note, or the guitar player choked something out and just did it totally wrong, and the band kind of looks around at each other like, what the hell just happened? That's the wrong way to handle it. The people that I'm playing with have been doing this for a really long time, and whenever those situations would occur, it's always just, pretend it never happened. I will tell you that there was one song in particular where I had the intro to the song. And the intro to the song is me, my guitar, myself. No bass, no drums, no rhythm guitar to back me up, no vocals to hide anything. Raw, in the air, and I messed it up. And part of it was nerves. Part of it was because I had lost my voice the song before, so I was trying to recover from that. And again, like I said a few points ago, I was overthinking it. But I totally messed up the intro to the song. The band comes roaring in, and, like nothing happened. We play the song out. People start dancing, get a big cheer at the end of the song. And the big thing that I learned in that moment was the audience doesn't really, I don't want to say they don't care or notice, but they don't really pay that much attention to it. Remember, we're practicing these songs every day, and we're playing these songs every weekend. So even the slightest variation, you're going to notice, and the band is going to notice. The people not necessarily, that they may not notice. And if they do, they forgive you pretty easy. Now, if you're playing like death metal or some kind of band with a super hardcore fan base, this may not be true. But for most other kinds of music, if you make a mistake like that, as long as you don't overreact, as long as the band doesn't start accusing each other of messing it up, and as long as there's no visual indicator that something went wrong, The audience is easy to forgive and quick to forget. They're there because they want to have a good time and they want to enjoy your music. They're not there to be critical. They're not there to be negative. Neither are you. You're there to entertain them, and hopefully you're having a good time doing it too. So that's that point. Mistakes will happen. Recover. Don't acknowledge it, and the audience will most likely forgive you. All right, point 4 isn't necessarily exclusive to music or performance, but it is true. The customer is always right. What do I mean by that? Well, there could be a time when you're playing a song and you think you nailed it. You thought the vocals were perfect, the drummer killed it, the bass player was really getting into it, the guitar solo was amazing, the rhythm was rocking. You felt like you blew that stage apart and melted everybody's faces off. And the song ends and you get nothing. It happens sometimes. So, what am I trying to say? The customer, in this case, the audience, is always right. You should never, ever, ever, ever doubt the audience's perception of what you've done. If it doesn't leave a lasting impact, it doesn't necessarily mean that your performance was bad or boring. It just means that for the people in that particular audience, at that particular venue, on that particular night, weren't super enthused about it. Don't let it get you down. Don't give up. This happened. I played 2 shows in my first weekend. There were a few songs that we played I thought we did really, really well, and there wasn't really much of a response from the audience at all. The next night, we played the same songs, and the audience loved it. And to my ear, it sounded exactly the same. So that's something that can happen. Don't say things to your audience or be mean to your audience or doubt them or anything like that. You're only on that stage because that audience is there to see you. And if that audience wasn't coming to that venue, you wouldn't be there playing. So always remember, they are always right, and you should respect whether they like your music or not. And if you don't get them with one song, try and get them with the next one, and just don't give up. All right, and the 5th point, the last thing that I want to talk about today that I learned from my first gig, and again, these things that I'm going over in this video, those of you who have experience doing this sort of thing, I fully expect that you already know all of these things. So I'm not trying to say that I'm the first one to ever think of any of this or anything like that. This is just simply, really, I'm just telling what I learned in my first experience here. And if there are some of you who don't have very much experience or are going to play at your first show or something like that, maybe this will be of a help to you. But the 5th thing is exclusive to vocalists, whether you sing and play or whether you just sing. And the number 1 lesson that I learned is save your voice. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I like to post music covers from time to time. I like to stretch my range. I like to be loud. I like to put a ton of emotion into it. And those are all things that a good vocalist should do. But I learned that there's a very, very big difference between working between 1 and 4 hours on a recording and performing for 3 to 4 hours straight. After the first set, I felt like my voice was totally blown out. And it was because at the end of one of the songs, I really got into it, and I was really feeling it, and I was really going for it, and I gave it all I got, and I think I did a really good job with that. We took a break between sets. We came back, started my next song, and I realized, oh no, part of my range is gone. What have I done? So basically what I learned was you have to gauge your voice. You have to gauge your power. It's like in a race with a race car. You got to know how much fuel you've got. and you've got to plan when you can burn the fuel, when you got to stop and pit. I didn't do that. It was like I went full throttle for the first quarter of the race, ran out of gas, had to pit, ended up finishing pretty far back. So the second night, I learned you can give it that passion and that power, but don't blow your voice out. This is not like you're recording a take for a recording for a video, or a recording for an album, or a recording for an EP or a demo or something like that. This is a performance, and when you finish, you're moving on to the next thing, and you got to be able to do the whole set all the way through. So save your voice. Give it all you've got as best as you can. Know what your limit is, though. Stop short of blowing your voice out. You can blow it out if you want to on the last song. It's not super healthy or good for you, but you can do that. So that's the fifth thing that I learned from my first gig. So those were 5 things that I learned from my first gig. Hopefully it was helpful to you, informative to you. Maybe you knew all these things already. Maybe my points are dumb and naive, and maybe I'll realize that I'm wrong. But after my first weekend of playing with these guys, those are the things that I learned, and I wanted to share them with you. I really appreciate you watching this video. Promise you we will get back to guitar mods, upgrades, amps, and stuff like that, doing some reviews in the future. But I wanted to put this video out because of my experience that I had. So thank you very much. Please like, please subscribe if you want to see more. Join the Discord if you want to talk about guitar, gear, etc. I do have an Instagram now. It's bigjake.music. And I have a Twitter, bigjake music. So follow me there if you like. Thanks again. See you guys next time.